Are you ready to fight like a champion, not just in the courtroom, but in every facet of your life? Welcome to the Legal Athlete Podcast. I'm Jess Sargis, your host, high-performance speaker, and coach for trial lawyers. With over 22 years as a trial attorney and legal exec, and an undefeated record as a former MMA fighter and boxer, I know what it takes to thrive in high-stakes environments. I also know that in both the courtroom and the cage, you're only as good as your wins. That's why I'm here to help you develop a fighter's mindset, discipline, and strategies so you can master your mental game and execute under pressure to win more and burn out less. Every week, I fuse insights from elite athletics, legal pros, and cutting-edge neuroscience and sports psychology to help you perform at your peak under pressure. So whether you're looking to reinvent your practice, your mindset, or your life, this is the podcast for you. It's time to become a legal athlete. Let's get it. Welcome back to the Legal Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jess Sargis, and I am so excited about my guest today. He is a former litigator turned LinkedIn Jedi, the Yoda of LinkedIn lawyer himself. It's Tony Albrecht. He is the founder of CONTENDER, an endurance athlete, the author of In the Creative Arena, Why Creativity is the Key to Building Your Future, and the host of the Linked Legal podcast himself. Basically, if legal thought leadership and personal brand building had a baby, Tony would ghostwrite its content, draw out its unique voice, and make sure it connected with the people it's meant to on LinkedIn. He lives in a forest north of Toronto with his wife and two tiny humans who he has noted insist on growing up too fast. If you're a lawyer who has ever looked at LinkedIn and thought, what do I even post? This episode is going to be your green light to stop lurking and start building without the cringy humble brags that were how most of us were accustomed to seeing LinkedIn core content. So Tony, welcome to the Legal Athlete. Let's get into it.
That was an awesome intro. Thank you, Jess. Let's go.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So one of the things that I love about how you teach people to use LinkedIn is to use their authentic voice. And I have to confess that part of my authentic voice is deep nerd. And so since you started the Yoda thing, I'm going to be weaving that throughout my questions here.
Okay. That is just fine. That came from one of my, probably my favorite testimonial I've ever gotten. And I'm just happy to lift it. I just changed my headline to that about 10 days ago. Mm-hmm. And the number of times that people are bringing that up is telling me that it's certainly standing out. Whether or not it's a good thing or not, maybe remains to be seen. But as a guy who grew up on those Star Wars movies, I'm loving it. So please, let's nerd out.
It's a deep sense of I think nostalgia and a very benevolent analogy too. So I love it. I think it's fitting. So we're going to start off my first question with my first Yoda quote, which is, "You must unlearn what you have learned." So we're going to start a little spicy. What lawyer LinkedIn post trope or activity do you see far too often that's actually the worst for building genuine connection?
That's a fantastic first question. Where I start with just about everybody I work with, whether it's in a ghostwriting context or in my bootcamp trainings, it's the idea that we all learned LinkedIn the wrong way. Right? We all learned it as that digital bulletin board where you stash your digital resume and you announce when you get a new job. I'm humbled and thrilled and all that good stuff. And that basically to your point, we're not trying to show up as we are. We're not trying to show up being ourselves. We're trying to show up in the way that we think the person who has our title and our experience would show up. So it's us trying to fit ourselves into that little box when we're all different shapes. Right? Some of us are square, some of us are rectangles, some of us are, what's the plural of rhombuses? What a rhombi? Is it rhombi?
Rhombi, I think.
Yeah, let's go rhombi.
We'll go with
Um,
rhombi.
and so there's, what it has led to, we're all there. Everybody has a LinkedIn profile in the legal profession because we felt like we had to. So you have this tremendous amount of attention that has been gathered there among the legal industry. But because we all learned to use LinkedIn that way, very, very, very few people are saying anything on LinkedIn that is even remotely interesting. So the LinkedIn platform and algorithm have a simple supply-demand problem where they have a tremendous demand for content that is interesting and engaging, and they have almost nobody in legal providing that. And that was very true. I started posting more often 3.5 years ago when I left the practice after spending most of 12 years as an insurance defense litigator. I was basically pushing paper out of my hometown of St. Louis for the most part. But what I've discovered, over these 3.5 years is that if you're willing to show up and just be yourself at all, just that willingness to say something you truly believe, say something you care about, you're inherently going to be more interesting than 99% of stuff that's out there. So you have this very ready-made way to get a disproportionate amount of attention out there.
I love that. And I think, I've talked with a lot of people that I think LinkedIn is probably the most slept on tool that can be their biggest competitive advantage in their thought leadership and career growth. And you've said that the LinkedIn feed is ripe for the picking. So how does a lawyer on LinkedIn start to actually dive in to do that? How do they first of all figure out how to start expressing their voice? And is it just in posts? Or are there other ways that someone can start using LinkedIn in a meaningful way, even if it's not posting?
There's a lot there. I'm not gonna jabber for 5 minutes, Jess. Okay. I'm gonna be succinct here, and then we'll keep rolling. The first thing we need to change is our mentality about the platform, where because we all learned it the wrong way, we see LinkedIn not as what you're saying, a platform that is ripe with opportunity. We see it as a place where we can get in trouble, where you say the wrong thing and your colleagues think you're stupid. Your managing partner decides your services are no longer needed. And it's just a place ripe with hazards. And so we don't want to say anything that could get us in trouble. Need to change that to embrace the reality, which is that if you're able to show up and just be yourself a little more, share a little more genuinely, like the strategy I talk about, be consistent, be generous, and be genuine. If you can do those things, approach it with that mindset. The stuff you do, you're just gonna. It's not easy. It's like getting in shape, right? When you're coming off the couch, and you're either what you mentioned, the endurance stuff. So I like to run long distances. You like to fight people. Either way, when you start doing it, chances are you're not going to be able to do it very long or very well, and that's fine. So you just try to start gaining some momentum, which, to your point of how do you do that? Is it through posting? Is it through other things? I encourage people to focus on commenting on posts that you find genuinely interesting. And if nothing on your feed is genuinely interesting, then your mission is to see if you can't find things that are more interesting. And when something comes across your feed that you read it, you actually spend time with it, and you at least click that little like button, because you're training the algorithm on what you're interested in. One of the things that we hear all the time is people saying LinkedIn is this, or LinkedIn is that, or LinkedIn only shows me this. LinkedIn shows you what you pay attention to. So if you don't pay attention to anything, if you're just constantly scrolling through stuff that's not interesting, then you're not training it on what you want to see. And if you're paying attention to stuff you find annoying, you're going to get more stuff that you find annoying. So there are people who are talking about things you are interested in right now, today, on LinkedIn. And things really start to get interesting when you find those people and you start spending more time with their stuff and engaging with them in an active way. Because that's where you can start, it's less of like just consuming other people's digital billboards, right, of what they're announcing. And it's more, you're starting conversations. You're starting to participate in conversations. And when we do it right, once we start to get in shape a little bit in this sense, not only does it get easier and more natural, but I'll be damned, it can even be a little bit of fun.
That's very true. I think that's one of the more surprising things people who start to use LinkedIn in this way discover is how much fun it can actually be. And I like the way you started out your answer, because even though I have not given you these quotes in advance, it led perfectly into my next Yoda quote, which is train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. That one is the fear that I think a lot of people get blocked by in not just posting, but also in interacting and showing up. But to your point, I think that LinkedIn at its best and at its most useful is less like an accomplishment announcement or a CLE seminar, and it's more like the happy hour after, where you're talking about the things that you've learned with people in a genuine way, and the things that you found interesting.
Yes, 100%. I love that analogy. It's the happy hour after. The
Mm-hmm.
way I talk to people about how you should be presenting, it's not that you're at the CLE showing your slides and reading through your slides. You're having dinner or having drinks afterward. It's just how you're talking shop with that. If you're a lawyer who's out on LinkedIn wanting to get more referrals, then talk like you're talking to a lawyer next to you. You're just talking shop. Like you're using that language. You're using that. You're telling stories most likely, right? And that's that's absolutely so like that sea change. That once you embrace that, things really start to open up in a different way. Let's circle back. I love that Yoda quote, and it is so interesting that once we start dipping our toe in those waters, and just about everybody is anxious about start like lifting your head
Mm-hmm.
on LinkedIn. That idea that we'll see. I was about to bring up a quote about was it like plants, and like one is the one that gets cut down.
Oh,
See,
yeah.
you just told me you're not editing podcasts anymore. I would have said, you know what, let's go back to try that again. But this idea that you want to keep your head down so that you don't lose your head, right? Just that
Mm-hmm.
mentality. What we realize when we start showing up is, number one, we're able to be ourselves for the most part without doing something catastrophic, right? Like that's okay. And that the things we're worried about happening, like they don't actually happen. The people this podcast is aimed at are going to be driven people, probably more entrepreneurial people, people who understand that so many of the good things in life, if not the best things in life, are a matter of calculated risk taking. Right? It's like putting ourselves out there and seeing what happens. The line I refer to most often is from the novelist Ray Bradbury: "If we must continually be jumping off cliffs and developing our wings on the way down," and starting to like put your head out on that on the platform can feel really uncomfortable, but it is one of those things, is that those wings will come. You're not going to crash and burn, and like the opportunities out there are considerable.
I think that's so true. And it's one of the things that I speak about and work with clients on as well, is exactly that concept, is that often we find courage through action, that we don't have it to begin with. We have some fears and we have some anxieties, but it's by starting anyway, by putting ourselves into motion, and taking a risk, that we find in the doing of it that we can exercise that courage, and that we can find a way to be successful, or at least to if we don't succeed right away, we have the ability to learn from our mistakes, and to have a sense of humor about it, in the process, and realize that it wasn't as bad as we might have feared, and that taking that chance is the the secret, I think, to not just a richer experience, but a more meaningful one for all of us.
That's
Go ahead.
beautifully said.
Thanks. Speaking of meaning, I'm going to get back to another Yoda quote. It's one of the more poetic. It says, "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter." And that reminded me of your emphasis on creativity. Creativity can sometimes feel like a luxury in the legal environments, like it's optional or frivolous in some way. But you
Mhm.
have long argued that it is essential. And I totally agree with that. What do you say to lawyers who have forgotten that creative spark, and how can they reconnect with that luminous side of their work and their communication?
Oh my goodness. These are such good questions. So, as a lawyer who, by the time I finished law school, had saying that creativity beaten out of me, I think, figuratively speaking, of course.
Mm.
Um, you know, I talk about my own struggles with addiction, alcoholism. I'm fortunate that in May I will celebrate 15 years since my last drink.
Congrats.
I'm 42, so that gives you a sense of like I had to give it up pretty early, as the consequences were getting rather significant fairly early on for me. And looking back, I draw a direct connection between how I saw booze as a sort of refuge and a coping mechanism as I was getting further and further away from the luminosity that comes with creativity. And so much of my late 20s and 30s, where, um, you know, it's a whole nother episode there about, torching my career, traveling the world for 4 years, meeting the Canadian woman who would become my wife, hence how I come to be in Canada, and sort of setting off the chain of events that eventually lead to me uh, starting Contender.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, so much of that was about me reconnecting with my own creative side. And I appreciate you mentioning the book where I described that book as me basically just doing my best impression of Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art,
Okay.
where that I absolutely, it's the book I give out to people most often. If anybody's listening to this and they want a copy, just DM me. I will send you a copy on me. I don't care how many people say that or where you are. That is how much I believe in what is in that book. Is the basic idea is that there's this natural force Pressfield describes called resistance. And resistance is that thing that pushes back on us whenever we try to do anything to better ourselves or
Mm.
to better the world or to make an impact. Right? It's the thing that keeps us on the couch eating potato chips when we probably ought to be getting off the couch and getting out to start training for something,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the thing that led me to choose booze instead of picking up the pen and writing for a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that has kind of unfolded for me over the last almost 10 years now, let's say, is that the stronger my creative muscles have gotten, the clearer my sense of who I am and who I want to be becomes. Not only that, but as I'm doing that, to your point about the getting reps of like the learning through action, the gaining confidence and clarity through action, there's so much power in that as we take those actions toward being more creative, you good things happen. Good things, they just do. And I know lawyers have a tendency to think that we are not creative, or this is not just lawyers. There's a lot of us who think that creativity is about the arts. It's about being a painter or a musician, yada, yada. And no, like being creative is about taking an idea and turning it into something out in the real world. That's the creative process. And so if you're an attorney, I know, Jess, you work with trial lawyers. I work with a number of trial lawyers as well. There is nothing more creative than having a case, having a story to tell, and then piecing together your evidence, your opening, your closing, who you're gonna call as your witnesses, how you're gonna cross the other side's expert, jury selection, like how you're gonna approach who's gonna be on that jury. You are piecing all of these things together, the hope of reaching that product of a great result for your client. That is a creative act. Like starting a business, if you're a law firm owner, there's nothing more creative than entrepreneurship. That idea of, I wonder if I could do that. And then doing all the things that are required to bring that thing to fruition and into existence in a place where it can grow and hopefully flourish. So like we are creative beings, and we tend to get happier and better versions of ourselves the more creative we get. And I've been very lucky that it's turned out that LinkedIn has been such a creative playground for me. And I know it has been for a lot of other people. I know you've talked about how it's been for you as well. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk. That actually would be, when the TED Talk comes, it's that.
It's amazing. It is so critical, the role creativity plays, not just in career advancement, but the internal work that it does to help us define and also continually generate who we are and who we want to be. And on the point of becoming happier, I came across some studies. My bag is neuroscience and sports psychology, but how the act of creativity, it actually kind of hijacks your brain so that creativity and anxiety can't coexist. It's anxiety is when our default mode network in our brain is doing self-referential work. It's kind of like you're stuck in a loop. You're not generating, you're ruminating. But when you tap into creativity, that's your executive network, your executive neural processes, and those actually suppress the default mode network that is what is activated when you are in anxiety and referencing the self. So it both on a neuroscience level and on a just, what conscious thoughts you're having level, creativity is one of the fastest ways to shut down anxiety. It's one of the reasons why those adult coloring books were so popular, particularly, I noticed them a lot during the pandemic when everyone is so stressed. And probably right now there's an uptick. I would bet on Amazon there's been an uptick
I would think so. Yeah, we're recording this on the day where the market's cratering after Liberation Day, quote unquote. Should we turn this into a politics podcast?
Should we turn that? We might I definitely would enjoy that. I think it would get a lot more eyeballs than we anticipated.
I want to follow up on that and ask you so with your, I I love that juxtaposition of creativity and anxiety. I haven't thought
Mhm.
about it in those terms. I guess are you referring to flow state of like when we're being creative, that we get into that flow state that sort of detaches from that anxiety producing part of our brain? Is that
Yes. Well, flow state is kind of a deeper creative work. And while certainly that has kind of a exponential effect, because when you're in flow, again, that's one of the most positive states that you can be in, and time passes like an instant. You're fully absorbed. But even just simple creative tasks immersed in something that is goal directed, um, in the truest sense of, you are creating something. You have a goal to create something, whether it's, I'm going to put blue on my coloring board, or I'm going to draw a tree on my daily what day is it board on the whiteboard or something. Just anything like that. You might not be fully in a flow state, but you're creating something, and that gets that executive control network activated, and basically diverts the energy from your default mode network, where you're just kind of stuck in a gear, spinning your wheels in some mental mud.
interesting? And I'm thinking about that in the context of, let's say, a lawyer who's in there are a lot of professional settings where this would apply. I could go back to myself as a senior associate in 2021. I'm in a firm, and a lot of what I do is anxiety inducing, and
Mm-hmm.
to your self-referential, which is to say, sort of like looking in on myself in a way of, I'm trying to understand how I fit into the firm, into the profession, and that is anxiety inducing inherently. And that's in the War of Art. One of the ideas I love that Pressfield talks about is the shift from thinking hierarchically to thinking territorially. And I've incorporated that idea into your brand pyramid, a tool I use with all my clients, where we don't talk about content pillars, we talk about your territory, which is a combination of the topics you tend to cover and your point of view. Like those two things, sort of think of the topics as like the pillars, and then the point of view being the space that fills in between those. And that shift in thinking I found to be so powerful. And I think it's directly tied to what you're talking about, that instead of thinking, going back to what I said in the beginning about when we show up online, we have a tendency to think, okay, how does somebody within my position in this organization show up? When we think territorially, we're thinking creatively, which is to say, okay, what am I making? What am I trying to put out there? What message am I trying to share? And the focus on that then is I like you use the word generative a minute ago, and I like that a lot. That we are making something happen, as opposed to just like ticking off a box where we're trying not to get in trouble or trying not to get yelled at or get fired. And it's just, like I was going to say it might feel like a subtle shift, but it's just I know for me it was absolutely like foundational, tectonic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that framing of it as territory, because it leads me to yet another Yoda quote, but I think it's what we're talking about here, which is, size matters not. Look at me, judge me by my size. Do you? So going into territory, can you break down why follower count or impressions or reach are not the be all and the end all for building what you call a magnetic presence on
Oh
LinkedIn?
my God. You're going to have to send me these quotes. This is fantastic. This is so good. And
I
it
will.
is all, Jess, your prep on this, like, mwah, perfect. Um, I love that because it is 100% true that something that happens when we do start showing up and we start paying attention more is you start running into people who have a ton of followers. You run into posts that have a ton of engagement, and we almost immediately are in danger of falling into that comparison trap. You know, that those relative numbers indicate something about our worth. And that simply is not true. Size matters not. But the way I talk about this is, like, when we're showing up hierarchically. I know so many, me through my time in practice. If I was going to post on LinkedIn, it was like, why me? Given that I'm not even a partner, and I'm not a leading voice, and why would anybody care what I have to say about anything? And I know so many of us feel that way because just about all of us can look around and see people who are further along the path than we are. And the truth is that every one of us is the expert of our own experience. Mm-hmm. And if we're thinking about things territorially, the thing that I lead off with on the pyramid is your corner of the internet. I try to help everybody I work with get clear on what is the piece of digital real estate that you are out to claim and own. And the beautiful thing about the internet, Seth Godin has written about, and others, the long tail of the internet, that we've transitioned from this industrial media environment where there were, 4 channels and some radio stations and a few newspapers. And if you wanted your message to get out to a lot of people, you basically had to find your way into one of those channels, and you had to tailor your message to average people, quote unquote. The internet, all of a sudden, that kind of head that was mass media has gotten stretched out into this very long tail, where all of a sudden now there are infinite corners of the internet. The real estate is infinite, literally. And so we're able to just pick any corner we want and then talk to not average people, quote unquote. We're able to talk to people in law who have an affinity for MMA, or just like maybe extreme sport, right? Like that is a legitimate corner, where most people are not going to be interested in that, but the people who are going to be into it in a way that's really powerful and could really resonate and can help us. Again, going back to that idea, it feels good to like connect with people who vibe in the same way. And like you and I, background in law, you and I both having an affinity for physical activity that tends to hurt, right? Like that we have where like we just started jiving immediately, right? Like when we started messaging a few months ago, just like, I like the cut of your jib, Jess. I like what you're doing, right?
That's right.
And like that's the beauty of the internet, where it's like you and I, in terms of the legal profession, in terms of entrepreneurs, we are tiny, tiny fish. We are guppies out there, right? But we are able to get so specific about who we are, who we serve, and how we do that, that we can become I've got my values on the wall here behind me, and one of them is we go for best in the world. Like that's the status we're going for. I'm not trying to be the best writer in the world. I'm not trying to be even the best ghostwriter in the world. I'm trying to be the best in the world at helping lawyers become magnetic on the LinkedIn platform. That's what I'm trying to do. And like that level of specificity, I say, like, am I the best in the world at that? I don't know. I think I might be. And if I'm not, I'm certainly in the conversation. And it's in large part because I picked a corner that was so specific that when I started 2.5 years ago, I was pretty much the only one standing on the corner. Like there was nobody else even thinking about that corner. And that is so powerful not only in terms of helping us start to gain momentum, showing up online, but also in building a business, whether that's a law firm or like your sort of coaching practice or my sort of agency. That level of specificity is how you cut through the noise and say, it doesn't matter that you're small, because you know what? The people you're trying to talk to, they're probably small too in a certain way. And the thing I've learned from working with some very successful people, we all feel that we all deal with the same stuff, like the same head games, the same feelings of insecurity and inadequacy and imposter syndrome. I've got 9-figure entrepreneurs on my roster, and they turn into therapy sessions sometimes where I'm trying to help be like, you're doing great. They are doing great, but it's just part of being human.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's a part also of people who want to challenge themselves, who want to not just be the best, they want to be their best. And so there is a constant expansion there too. Is one of the things I try to help people with is narrowing or eliminating that gap between where they feel their potential is and where their performance is, so that they're living up to their potential. And then here's a secret with why you've got 9-figure folks in your client base who are still feeling like maybe I'm not good enough, is that once they hit that potential, they're like, but where is it really? Where is it really? And so there's, a constant raising of the bar. So people who want to get to that bar and get over that bar are constantly feeling, well, I'm not doing enough. I'm not there yet. Or I see another one. So it's very easy to get into that, particularly when you are a striver. And I think, it kind of dovetails into my next question, and your concept that it's very important to be generous. Another yoga quote: "Pass on what you have learned." One of the things I want to get into about what you have learned comes from your endurance running, your sport, similar to my sport, where it is pain in the process. But I think, as you've said, both on LinkedIn or in your profession, and particularly in a sport, being very specific about what your focus and your goal is a real key, not only to preparing to succeed, but actually succeeding in those toughest moments. So I'd love to see, if there are particular mindsets or strategies that you use both in your endurance running and then on LinkedIn. I loved your latest episode of your Linked Lawyer podcast or Linked Legal podcast about how the LinkedIn game isn't a marathon. It's like Big D's backyard ultra. And maybe you could explain that a little bit also.
Right on. All right. We packed a couple different
there was a
things in
lot.
there.
It was a compound question. Objection, Your Honor.
Objection. Yeah. Overruled. Answer the question, counsel.
What do you think you bring to your professional life from your endurance competing and running?
Yeah, it's the more I get into the running, where I think it's a little overblown to call me an endurance athlete. I think of myself more as a guy who needs to put things on the calendar to stay in shape. To your point about like the needing to have specific goals, because I am the guy who loves having snacks on the couch.
Who doesn't?
Right. Who doesn't? So I'm, and to your point about when you reach a certain level of potential, then it's like, you realize, okay, we're not there yet. We discovered one edge, but then that edge is always, that's the thing about comfort zones, right? You step over that comfort zone into that territory beyond. And what you realize is your comfort zone just follows you and you get more comfortable out there. And then it's, to your point, you're looking for that next peak. I'm like, where are we going next? And that's how I went from, I did my first marathons when I was maybe 22, 23 years old. And then by the time I'm 40, I run my first 100K race. I did my second 100K last year. And I'm gearing up for Big D's Backyard Ultra up here in Ontario in 6 weeks. And this is an event that is It's not even a race. It is a 4.1 mile loop out in the woods where everybody just starts together, like, every hour on the hour. And your goal is just to go do those 4.1 miles and come back in less than an hour. If it takes you more than an hour, you're out of the race. If you come back and then you're not at the start line for the next loop, you're out of the race. And the goal is just to make it through. At that podcast episode you're referring to was a lot of fun. That as my mind started wrapping around how this thing is different than a typical race where, the gun goes off and everybody just goes. And then it's just, there's that race mentality of, even if you go, like when I go out for my 100K, I have no illusion of winning. Right? I'm not even going to be close to winning, but there is that it's a race.
Yeah.
But this thing with this dynamic where it's like, you all start every hour together. There's really no winner. It's just, are you going to finish? Mm-hmm. How that applies to what we're doing when we're talking about LinkedIn or we're talking about entrepreneurship. It's been so interesting to see how, I used to be so achievement oriented and goal oriented in the sense of, when I get there, I'm going to be happier. When I get there, I will be successful. And just shifting the understanding to, there is no finish line. There is no arriving. That cliche about how the destiny or the journey is the destination, that sure does appear to be true. And so it's the trick here, like, why is I keep running longer and longer things. Like if I do big D's the way I'm trying to, the most I've covered in one day is like 67 miles. On this one, I'm going to cover almost 100 if I succeed in this, right? It's crazy.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's me trying to go out to learn what happens, when I push beyond that comfort zone more, just knowing that it's all the same. Like it's all we're all in the same boat. Like there's a lot of pain in life. There's a lot of anxiety. Nothing goes according to plan.
Right.
And then even when you make it to that finish line or that goal, that then it is on to that next one.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I think, it reminds me of, again, given my bent towards combat sports, reminds me of Rocky, the original, because people forget that in the original Rocky, he doesn't win the fight. His goal was to go the distance. Like you're saying for the backyard ultra, that was the goal. He realized, no, there's no way, but no one's ever gone the distance with Apollo Creed. I'm going to go the distance. And so at the end, when he's yelling, "Yo, Adrian, I did it," what he did was he managed to go through every single round with the champion and still be on his feet at the end. And God. So that's the victory.
We could cut my 5 minutes there and just do that. Like that is perfect. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the journey. It's the journey. It is the testing of yourself. Can you set this very specific goal and then do what is necessary to prepare and execute to get there? And I think there's so many overlaps between sport and endurance and LinkedIn, as well as being a lawyer. That is exactly on point. I love that perspective. I loved that episode too of Link Legal. It was phenomenal. And I think I've got two more questions for you. I'll try to get through them quickly because I want to be respectful of your time. Here's my last Yoda quote, which is, "Do or do not. There is no try."
I was waiting for that one.
It's the famous one. We got to end big. Yes. So for the lawyers who are still watching from those digital sidelines, who think that posting on LinkedIn is just for influencers or interns or job seekers, what would you lovingly shout from the metaphorical bleachers to help them go from spectators to stepping into that creative content arena.
Mm-hmm. That mentality that you have about why you're not doing it, of why it's not a good use of your time, or why it's just not worthwhile, everybody else has that mentality as well. Because you all have that mentality, a goofball like me who left the practice 3.5 years ago now has one of the biggest voices in the legal industry in the United States on the world's biggest professional networking platform. That's not even me like humble bragging. Maybe it's me just like, but I'm saying like, there's no reason for me to be one of the leading voices in legal on LinkedIn when I'm not even practicing. I'm just hanging out up here being creative in Canada, saying like nobody else is on the field. 99.9% of people are not even in the arena, so to speak. So what I would say to you is if you have anything pulling on you to say, I have something to say, I have something I want to make happen, I have a goal I want to bring to fruition in my career, in my life, chances are that learning how to show up online and connect with people in a way that can build relationships and strengthen your network is a way to move in the direction of making those things happen. How's that?
I love that. I love that. That's great advice. That is a great rallying cry. That just I'm not going to steal it from Nike, but just do it. Just do it because the difference between sitting on the sidelines and becoming a voice people want to hear is the action of it. Is just
It
putting it
is.
out there.
It could be
Yeah.
little. It doesn't need you. I tell people you could post once a week and you're doing just fine. You could post once every other week. You're doing just fine. You can go for a month where all you're doing is making one solid comment, let's say a week, and you're making progress. Does not need to be a big thing.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so now we've gotten to my last question, my favorite question I ask all of my guests. I took this from my idol, Oprah, who got it from Gene Siskel, the legendary film critic, which is if there is one thing that you know for sure, whether it's about LinkedIn lawyering, about life, about running anything, one thing in life that you know for sure, what is it?
Hmm. None of us knows what's going on. We're all just trying to do the best we can. And this life is unpredictable. We're here for as long as we're here. And we don't know how long that's going to be. So we should probably try to make the most of the time we've got.
Amen. Amen. I love that one. It is one I live as well. And I know that to be true. I love that. So Tony, I appreciate your generosity yet again with sharing with me and spending this time for the listeners. We'll wrap up with your actionable suggestions. Number one, when you're going to be on LinkedIn, be consistent, be generous, and be genuine. If you can pick up or ask Tony to pick up the War of Art book by Pressfield, you should do that. And how else can people connect and find with you? What's the best way? What are you working on that you'd love people to know about?
Check in with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to send me a connection request if you have any questions about the platform or anything we've talked about. Feel free to ask. I'm always happy to help if I can. And these days, we're directing people toward our boot camps, like our 1 month trainings for folks who are starting to want to get, at least think about getting in shape when it comes to showing up online.
I love that. I love that. And I have been able to take advantage of talking with you and talking with some of the other LinkedIn vendors in your Ask Me Anythings. I will not say it's a community, but it's kind of a community. But it's
happening.
It's a great group of folks, and that's another amazing thing that you've been doing that I really appreciate and is super helpful in talking with interesting folks who are doing fun things.
Thank you. Thank you for being part of it. That's another way to get in the mix. Yeah. See, I do such a bad job of pitching my own stuff. It's something my team's trying to get me better at. I'm much better at selling the message than I am actually selling my stuff.
That's one of your charms. It's one of the reasons why you are a LinkedIn top voice, and we'll continue to love you for it. So thank you very much again, Tony. I'll put all your links in the show notes as well. And thank you for your time today. It's been great.
Thanks, Jess. This was fun.
Thank you for joining me on the Legal Athlete Podcast. If you're ready to take your mental game to the next level, let's connect. Want me to speak to your group or team? Or are you ready for one-on-one trial fight camp coaching to perform at your best when it matters most? Reach out to me with a direct message on LinkedIn or through my website at thelegalathlete.com. Until next time, remember that the best version of yourself isn't some future version. It's the you who makes your daily choices. So make great ones. Make the ones that keep you on that champion fighter journey, building a record and a life you love.